Welcome back to the 10-second runoff powered by Culture Media with your host, Joe Mitchell, producer Magic Mikey Shiaza. There he is. No Brogan Bourgeois today because, Bama fans, but...
Yeah, that's definitely why.
Yeah, Bama fans. No, I'm kidding. Brogan will be back with us Sunday as we are figuring out our, season that they're not playing schedule. Because truly, there is no off season considering how much we have to talk about today. The NCAA is toast. It's done.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not done, but it feels like it's the beginning of the end right now. Before we get into it, my bourbon wasn't in the frame, which is a rookie mistake, as we are backed by 7-3 Distilling out of New Orleans, Louisiana. Bywater bourbon is by far my favorite drink that they make, favorite spirit that they make. It is so good, so smooth. My favorite bourbon. I'll drink it over a lot of bourbons. I'm not going to go as far to say like Blanton's and stuff like that, but I'll take it over Makers. I'll take it over Jack. I'll take it over Elijah Craig. Like, I love this bourbon. It's really, really good. On top of that, they got the St. Rock vodka. It's fantastic. They even have it in a cucumber flavor. They have the Irish Channel whiskey. They made a coffee. We went down to the distillery. They made a coffee with the Irish Channel whiskey, and it was
That sounds real good.
phenomenal.
That
And I'm
sounds
not an
really
Irish
good.
whiskey kind of guy, but it was really, really good. They got the Black Pearl rum. They have the Gentilly gin.
They got everything.
Do what?
I said they got everything.
Oh, dude. The Gentilly gin is unbelievable. I'm not a gin guy. Like, I'll have a French 75 every now and again, like, because my girlfriend likes them. Emily loves French 75s. So I'll drink one with her every now and again. But they have a gin that is barrel aged, like brown gin. I think it's, yeah. There she is. Really, really freaking good, dude. Point is, go to Total Wine, go to Rouse's, go to wherever you get your alcohol from, and get 7-3 Distilling. Fire stuff. Football. College football.
That's what we're here for.
Oh, yeah, man. And we got a lot. We really do have a lot to talk about. I said it feels like it's the beginning of the end for the NCAA right now. If you're a college football fan, if you keep up with it at all, I know it is what you call, not you, but people who don't love the sport as much as you and I would call it the off season, right? Because they're not playing games. But college football is happening every day. We're posting about it nonstop, multiple times a day. There's stuff going on throughout the day, all day. And what's going on right now is the NCAA opened an investigation into the University of Tennessee over potential NIL violations in the recruitment of Nico Iamaleava. Well, a collective flew Nico on a private jet to the University of Tennessee for his official visit. Supposedly there was some sort of crossover where the university paid for it, which would technically be a violation. But here's the problem. None of the rules stay the same. From week to week, it feels like we have a different rule. The NCAA can't figure out anything. Like, they can't figure out when they crap, does it come out of their ass or does it come out of their mouth? I don't know. I'm so fed up with the NCAA. You can come on the screen here because you're laughing and it's throwing me off. But I'm so fed up with the NCAA. It's unbelievable, dude. Nothing stays the same. Nothing is consistent. And you have a joke of an entity trying to run something that is $1 billion corporation. And it's pathetic. They can't figure out NIL. They can't figure out the postseason. We only have a 2-year contract in terms of what this 12-team playoff is going to look like, which, by the way, we're switching from a 4-team playoff, which only lasted 10 years from the BCS. And then before the BCS was introduced, you just had people picking it. And before the people were picking it, they would just claim a champion without having a championship game. Dude, the NCAA is pathetic. I mean, am I wrong? They can't figure out the freaking transfer portal. A couple years ago, we didn't even have the transfer portal. They introduced it. It went haywire. Now you have 2 windows. One of them is in the middle of the playoff. So you have guys who are potentially playing for a championship run. And if they want to leave their school, they have to do it before the national championship game. Like, that is obnoxious.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. And then you don't get another one until spring. So if you're one of those guys that's playing for a national championship.
Unless your coach left.
Unless your coach left.
Which that's one that I understand.
I get
your
that
coach
one.
leaves, by all means, go transfer to another school.
Yeah, you get a 30-day window. But the point is, if you're one of those kids who, didn't transfer because you were playing for a national championship during the window, you got to wait till the spring to transfer. So if you were going to transfer, if you were going to transfer, you got to miss all of summer. You have to miss the strength and conditioning that they do. All of that kind of stuff. You get there during the spring and then have just thrown straight into spring ball. That's not something that works in modern day college football. It's why the freshmen, the true freshmen, whenever they get to campus, if you got there in the spring, like,
most big guys do now. They do early enrollment all the time.
You have to, or else you have no chance of playing.
Yeah.
Because you can't get there in the fall and then be like, oh, by the way, we play in a month and a half.
Yeah.
That's not real. That's
a month
not
ago,
real
you were
life.
doing high school conditioning, and now you're running with guys 4 years older than you, getting ready to go make millions of dollars playing the sport professionally. Like, that doesn't really make sense.
The point is, the NCAA blows.
If I had $1 for every time that exact statement has come up on this show, I'd have a lot of money.
You'd have a lot of money. And you know what?
Say it again. Let them know.
Here's another $1. They blow. And I can say it as many times as you want. It won't fix the problem because they already make the most money ever and just refuse to fix it. But the heroes that we didn't know we needed, the Attorney Generals of Virginia and Tennessee. I mean, on some Batman type stuff right here. Like, this is huge.
They swooped in.
So the NCAA launches an investigation into the University of Tennessee, and the Attorney General of Virginia says, you know what? This doesn't have anything to do with any of the organizations in my state, but we're going after them. Because at this point, this is no longer the NCAA versus Tennessee or Tennessee versus the NCAA. It's all of college football against the NCAA. Virginia's Attorney General launched or filed a suit. Tennessee was right there in the mix. And I don't believe that those are the only two that are going to be involved in this. I think you're going to see a lot of attorney generals through several states who have prominent football programs jump in on this and go after the NCAA because it is unbelievable and nobody's holding them accountable. So at this point, like, you're talking about Congress potentially, or the courts potentially getting involved. And I think that if they're going to fix this sport and make it what it deserves to be, that's what's going to have to happen. Because no one is holding the NCAA accountable, and I want to beat this table, but this mic picks up everything. I'm so jacked up, man. This needs to be a freaking rebellion in terms of college football, go after the NCAA. And you kind of are seeing that in terms of what the conferences are doing. At what point is the SEC and the Big Ten going to hold more power than the NCAA? I think you're way far away from that right now, but I don't think you're as far as we think we are.
But then the question comes, in my opinion, then what happens to the other NCAA sports? Like, say, I don't know, Ohio State, for example, they have all their sports. Is college football just going to be its own entity, not run by the NCAA and just sanctioned by this new company or whatever you want to call it that doesn't exist yet? Like, what's the solution here? Like, the NCAA sucks, but they can't fail. Or, like, can they fail? I think they're too big to fail.
Oh, they're failing.
Well, but what's going to happen? Are they going to get a slap on the wrist, make a couple of rule changes that are inevitably going to get changed again in a couple of years? What's the solution here? Like, I understand with NIL rules, all that stuff changing, like the transfer portal, that stuff's all new. So it's going to take a couple of years to iron it out, get all the kinks out. I get that, but it always just feels like there's another problem popping up.
Yeah.
No matter what, there's always going to be another problem. There's always going to be another problem. And it's only in football. Have you heard of any of these come up with NCAA basketball?
Oh, this Tennessee thing is across the board. It's in several sports.
Really?
Yeah.
I've only heard about it in football. I've never heard any problem. Well, aside from a couple of transfer portal rules and basketball.
Oh, there's definitely transfer portal issues in basketball.
Yeah.
So, look, we're talking about it in the context of college football because that's what we talk about. But it's across all sports, dude. The NCAA is just terrible. They add $1 to the piggy bank there.
We got a chat from Anthony Renato saying NCAA sucks. So, yeah,
Yep.
We 100% agree with you there.
Yeah, I'm in on that. But you asked what the solution is. And, Mikey, I'll tell you what. The good thing about my job, right? Culture Media pays us to do these shows and talk about college football, and I love that. It is amazing. They don't pay us to make the solutions. You know what I'm saying? These are hard things that are going to take time to fix, and it's why at this point there's lawsuits there's lawsuits underway, and it's going to take as crazy as it is, it's going to take national government to get involved and iron these things out and set rules across the board. That is not something that is not something that I have an answer to. Anthony asked, any other states jump in the lawsuit yet? Sorry if I'm late. As far as I know, it's just Tennessee and Virginia. That's as of 8:43 p.m. on Wednesday. I'm not entirely sure, but I would very much expect several other states to jump in, specifically states with multiple schools or multiple programs within their state. I would expect what?
If Texas comes in.
That's what I'm saying. I would expect
Texas might be its own country in a couple of years. So if they jump in, they might just say, "Hey, Texas football, everybody just come to Texas."
Yeah.
All the universities.
They have enough schools, bro. I mean, they have
Oh, yeah.
Texas, Texas Tech, Baylor, TCU, SMU. They got schools over there.
They got a lot.
They got.
I mean, football is everything in Texas.
Yeah, dude.
Football, barbecue,
Yeah.
and a couple of other things that I'm missing. But
Okay.
that's it. That's Texas.
Thanks, Mikey. But no, to your point, yeah, if Texas jumps in, if Florida jumps in, Alabama jumps in, Georgia has 2 Power 5 schools
California,
in it.
possibly.
California, like there's places all over the country that potentially
heck,
could
even
get
Louisiana
in on this.
has like 4 or 5, right?
They have 1 Power 5 school.
Oh, yeah, my fault.
Yeah, but yes, I think Louisiana would be one that jumps in there. The LSU is a very, it's a huge brand. So I think any of these, the reason I said these states that have multiple Power 5 programs, organizations within their state, I think those are the ones that are more likely to jump in on it because it affects them more broadly in terms of the economy of the state.
True.
But yeah, a state like Louisiana where LSU brings in tons of income for the state, yeah, I think it's very plausible that they would jump in as well. So I don't know what the answer is. I don't know what this looks like, down the road. But it feels like you're finally getting some unified pushback against the NCAA, and I am all here for it. Love it.
Yeah.
Love it.
Stick it to the man.
All right. Moving on here. We haven't even gotten a chance to talk about this on the show yet, just because of sickness and
Whole lot of stuff.
yeah, lots of things going on. But Sherrone Moore, head coach at Michigan. We knew Jim Harbaugh was leaving. We didn't know exactly where he was going to go, but we figured he was on the way out. Sherrone Moore, head coach at Michigan now. He has wins over Bowling Green, Penn State, Maryland, and Ohio State just in this last year as an interim head coach position. 2 of those huge wins, Penn State and Ohio State. Now, in those 2 wins, he ran the ball a lot. And look, this is a run-first kind of guy. In the Big Ten, I think that's perfectly fine. I think, look, it won a national championship this year doing it that way.
Yeah.
J.J. McCarthy got tons of credit, and I don't mean to take any credit away from him, but he didn't put up flashy numbers this year, right? Like his QBR, awesome. All that kind of stuff, good. Efficiency, fine. But, like, he wasn't throwing for tons and tons of yards and tons of touchdowns. Like, that's just not the reality of the situation. He was a solid quarterback who didn't turn the ball over. He protected the football, and he opened up opportunities for Michigan to run it down everybody's throat, and that's what they did. That's what you're going to get more of with Sherrone Moore, which, hey, is good news. You just won a national championship. But this is a guy who, at Michigan, in that staff room, he has experience as the tight ends coach, as the offensive line coach. He was the co-OC whenever he was the offensive line coach. Then this past year, he was the OC. Now he's getting elevated to that head coaching job. I'm all fine and good with that. I think Michigan's going to be just fine. Do I think they repeat as national champions? Probably not. The Big Ten just got a little bit harder. Not saying that Michigan can't handle that, but it just that's how that works. It decreases your odds. So I don't know. They're a team that certainly can win the national championship, but I think that's a little high of an expectation in year one under a new head coach. My biggest concern here is who do you go get as the DC? Because you lost Jesse Minter, who, by the way, has put out top 5 defenses over the last half decade. Like really, really good defenses over there at Michigan. He, headed out the door with Jim Harbaugh. So on that defensive coordinator shortlist, you have Steve Klinkscale, who is the defensive backs coach and co-DC at Michigan. So obviously that's a clear shoe-in. He was the co-defensive coordinator. He has experience there and, can just kind of keep things rolling the way they were. I don't know if he can keep it up at that same level, but they had a really good defensive backfield last year. And if he has experience in the defensive play calling, section of the defense, that makes a lot of sense. You also have Trey Scott, defensive line coach at Georgia since 2017. I love that name in terms of who's going to be the next DC at Michigan. That seems like a really, really big name to go get. Not a defensive coordinator, or at least previously he was not, but he's at Georgia, right? They're putting out some of the best defenses in the country. The defensive lines that he's coached are unbelievable. Just pick a defensive lineman for Georgia over the last, or what was it, since 2017?
Yeah.
So pick a defensive line coach at Georgia since over the last 6 years. They're all in the league.
They all play for the Eagles.
Yeah, they're all in Philadelphia. So
yeah,
that one to me seems like a shoe-in. He's a guy that I don't know how much longer he's going to be at Georgia, even if he doesn't get this Michigan job, and not because he's not doing enough. I think he's significantly overachieving. He's a guy who probably deserves a little bit of a pay raise and a shot at a defensive coordinator job. I don't know if Michigan's going to be the team to give him that shot at DC, but it would make a lot of sense to me. So we'll see what happens there. 3 more guys on this short list. You have Chris Hewitt, Ravens passing game coordinator since 2020, but previously before that, he was a defensive backs coach. I don't know how much merit there is to this one, but it does carry on a tradition of defensive coordinators for Michigan coming out of that Ravens coaching tree. The last 2 have been from Baltimore.
Interesting.
Yeah, so you had Jesse Minter and Mike McDonald. Both came from the Baltimore Ravens. So this is just kind of a name that what?
Well, I mean, does that have to do with the Harbaugh connection?
I would assume.
Well, now he's not there anymore.
Right.
So.
No, I'm with you.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm saying is I don't know how much merit this one has to it, but it was a name that showed up on the short list, and I'm assuming that's why.
Mm-hmm.
So
that makes sense.
Sorry, I had to take a sip of that. That Bywater bourbon slaps, boy.
Hitting?
You also have Spence Nowitzki. He's a defensive coordinator at the University of Ohio. So interesting because not a super sexy name in terms of Ohio, G5 school. But they had one of the best. Like they had a solid defense this year. He's one of the most esteemed defensive coordinators in the country. And again, much like I was saying with Trey Scott, this is a guy that is going to get a pay raise here pretty soon and going to get a more high-profile job than Ohio. It would make a lot of sense for Michigan to go get him because he's already close. He's in the Midwest. Sorry, I got choked up there. He's in the Midwest. And also having those Ohio connections, especially considering your biggest rival is Ohio State, you can go back and recruit the state of Ohio as well as the state of Michigan, as well as the entire Midwest, but specifically the state of Ohio. That makes a lot of sense to me. And this is a guy that has proven, at the Division I level, not at the Power 5 level, but at the Division I level, he can go out and coach defense, and he's been really solid doing it. I like him too. Last one, Mike Elston. He's the defensive line coach and recruiting coordinator at Michigan. To me, he seems probably the 4th or 5th most likely out of these guys to get the job. So I don't know. I'd be willing to say Mike Elston is not the next defensive coordinator at Michigan, but it would be another inside hire, and that would make sense.
Yeah.
And I'm not even going to say that. I don't know if it would make a ton of sense, but it would be an easy move to bring up a guy who's already in the program.
Yeah.
What you got on that? Anything?
I mean, I think that the hiring of Sherrone Moore, great move by Michigan, and I think that the players kind of agree. Because, correct me if I'm wrong, but I haven't really seen too many Michigan guys enter the transfer portal ever since Harbaugh left. Correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, we've been getting news left and right of people leaving Alabama after Saban left, and then obviously guys from Washington followed DeBoer over there. But I haven't really seen too much news on Michigan guys leaving. So I don't know if that's going to hurt them recruiting in the future because they don't have Harbaugh, but it kind of seems like the guys in the building like the hire. And, I mean, he already won those 2 games this year, and if he's already calling the plays, it's really not that much of a difference. I'm not saying that losing Harbaugh isn't a big deal. It kind of is. But it kind of seems like this was the best move for them, and I think that whoever their defensive coordinator is, I think that they're going to make the right move.
I hear you. I do think that's a little bit fallacious because you saw so many guys on that Michigan team either graduate or go to the draft.
That's true. I forgot about that.
So I get what you're saying. You didn't see a ton of guys transfer out, but I don't know that you would have regardless.
Yeah.
So I don't really know how to read that.
That's true.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, they did have a very experienced team this year who everybody's like JJ's going to the draft. Roman Wilson, I saw him in the Senior Bowl today. He made a crazy catch at practice. That was pretty cool.
Corum.
So, yeah, exactly. So, yeah, that does make sense. But, I mean, even like the lower level guys, like they haven't left. So I feel like that's good for Michigan, and I think they're moving in the right direction.
Yeah.
And plus, they just won a national championship. So keeping a guy who's came from that coaching tree and just kept it in, kept the same system going, I think it's the right move for them, and they're moving in the right direction. Getting all mixed up with my words here.
Yeah. All right, I'm pulling up. We're gonna get into talking about the top 10 favorites to win the national championship in 2024. Now remember, this is a 12-team playoff, so it does look a little bit different. Give me 1 second. I'm pulling this up here.
I'll pull it up as well.
We're using DraftKings, correct?
That's what I have up.
Okay.
Well, it could be interesting if you go to a different book and we see how they go.
Well, let's stay on DraftKings just for the sake of unity, or uniformity rather.
Same thing.
Same thing.
Same difference.
But I like the way uniformity sounds. Okay, so.
All right.
All right. Here we go. So number 1, odds-on favorite to win the national championship in 2024, Georgia yet again.
Yeah.
Won 2 back-to-back. Didn't make the playoff this year. Probably were deserving and could have won it potentially if they were there. I don't know. I'm not going to make that claim. They weren't there. They couldn't. You can't win it if you're not there. But I do think they were one of the 4 best teams.
Agreed. It's just how the cards were dealt, and now 12 teams. So,
yeah.
I mean, I feel like they're definitely going to make the playoffs at the bare minimum, and wouldn't be shocked if they ended up in the championship again.
So plus 330 odds there. At number 2, Ohio State. Plus 500 odds. What are your thoughts there?
It's not surprising. You know, I feel like they're giving them the benefit of the doubt that Michigan is going to slip a little bit this year, which, you know, we were just talking about how they're doing a great job making these hires, but I don't think they're going to be able to repeat what they did last year at Michigan. So I do think that Ohio State will win that conference. And even if they don't, still, like we're saying, the playoffs are expanding. It's 12 teams now, and that gives them more chances to get there. So I don't hate them at number 2 at all.
I don't. I really like them there. And look, you saw what they did in the transfer portal. They went out and they got Quinshon Judkins. They got Quinshon Judkins. They went and got Caleb Downs. They pulled Julian Sayin from Alabama. They loaded up in the transfer portal. They also signed a really, really nice freshman class.
Almost made Ryan Day faint.
Yeah. While we're on the point of Ryan Day, that's exactly where I was going. What I will say about this is having the second best odds to go win the national championship, having Jim Harbaugh leave Michigan, having all of those older guys or not older guys, but more experienced juniors, seniors at Michigan who are going to the draft or just graduating. Having all of those factors in play, when the biggest complaint about Ryan Day is he can't win the big game, hadn't been able to beat Michigan as of late, lost the semifinal game last year to Georgia on that last second play. That's been the biggest complaint. I think Ryan Day has positioned himself really, really well to make a title run, but the pressure just got bigger.
It's do or die at this point.
The pressure is on for Ryan Day because Jim Harbaugh is out of the way. Michigan had a lot of guys go to the draft. You pulled in a really good recruiting class. You pulled in a really good transfer portal class. If you can't get it done now, I don't know how much longer Ohio State's going to stay that way, which is a crazy thing to say because I think he's been a really, really good coach. And I think anybody would be lucky to have Ryan Day as a head coach.
But close don't cut it.
Close don't cut it. And if you can't win your rivalry game, like every year, they say their goals are beat Michigan, win the Big Ten, win the national championship. Over the last couple of years, they haven't done any of them.
It has to be in that order. You have to win 1 to make 2 and 3. And Yeah, I mean, I feel like is he on the not hot seat, but if he doesn't beat Michigan this year, I mean, it's tough to say not make the playoffs because I feel like he's gonna make the playoffs this year. But if they don't make it deep into the playoffs, is Ryan Day on the hot seat?
I'm not saying that.
Oh, I'm asking you.
I know, and
You
I'm not.
refuse to- He plead the fifth here.
Well, the problem is personally, I don't believe he should be on the hot seat. I think he is such a solid coach who has them in the mix every single year that it's. I think fan bases drastically underestimate how hard it is to win a national championship in college football.
For sure.
Because, fan is a root word of fanatic, and people are
crazy.
They are fanatic about their teams, and so I think that's the reality of it. Look, you can say that about me when it comes to the NFL, right? I'm from the South. I'm a huge Saints fan. Saints blow.
You're delusional.
They'll never lose again. You see what I'm saying? Like, that's how it works.
Like, at least for me, I'm more of a realistic fan when it comes to the Jets. I'm definitely not. We're going to win the Super Bowl next year. But I don't know. It's just me. I expect disappointment when it comes to my teams because then I feel like you'll never be hurt. But I know I'm one of the few who will say that.
Yeah.
But I do agree with you when it comes to – if you ask any of these a fan of any of these teams in the top 10, hey, you guys going to win? Yeah, we're winning the national title this year for sure. Like, people are delusional when it comes to rooting for their teams, and I love it. I think that's what makes sports great. That's 100%. What makes everything amazing, especially with college football, how there's so many teams. You could be from anywhere and cheer for any team. Like, it's crazy, and that's what makes college football beautiful.
And that's how you can have 100,000 people packed into a stadium screaming over people throwing a ball and running into a painted area. And I love everything about it. I love it. I'm all for it, and college football is the best sport on the planet. Like, that is my opinion, and I love it. And so we're saying those things about fan bases, but it's also what makes the sport great. Now, the problem with that is you can have a guy like Ryan Day who is in the top 5, top 10 every single year, but has struggled to get over the hump of Michigan, who, by the way, is also in the top 5, top 10 every year and is coming off a national championship, that now the fan base of that top 5, top 10 team is like, this guy can't beat Michigan. I'm like, hey, man, nobody could beat Michigan. Like that.
Nobody beat him this year.
Yeah, and the only team to do it last year was in the playoff.
Yeah.
So I think it's a little bit of a interesting scenario. I do not think he deserves to be on the hot seat by any stretch of the imagination. But if he keeps losing to Michigan, who knows what ends up happening. And I think the pressure just got a little bit elevated for him.
For sure.
Number 3, we have Texas, plus 750. Does this surprise you a little bit? It's going to be their first year in the SEC. They are coming off a playoff appearance. Quinn Ewers is coming back. What are your thoughts?
Surprising, no. Because if you look at it, it's their first year in the SEC. Last year they beat Alabama, who was one of the best teams in the SEC by far. And I think that they're going to
them in Georgia.
Yeah, exactly. Well, not by far. I apologize.
Yeah.
I think that they're going to transition really well into the SEC. I think that they can stand toe-to-toe with any of those teams. It's just a matter of durability, I guess you could say, because now instead of having 1 or 2 of those games, they have a lot more. So there's a lot more chances for them to slip up. So I think that's going to be interesting to see. But I don't hate them at 3. I mean, if I had to power rate them, I'd probably put them at around the 4 to 6 range. But I don't hate them at 3. Like 3 to 6, I think that's fair for them. But, yeah, I mean, Texas is a great team. Quinn Ewers is back for another year. They still have basically everybody. Correct me if I'm wrong, right? Did they lose anybody?
Yeah, I mean, they definitely lost people.
Some guys, but like if your quarterback coming back, that's one. Like that's huge. That's
and the biggest thing there is quarterback depth, right? And
yeah.
Arch Manning is largely unproven, but he was a perfect recruit coming out of high school. And I know a lot of people would say if his last name wasn't Manning, he'd be a 3-star. I think we're actually being a little unfair to Arch because of his last name, as opposed I think the whole argument of everybody's biased towards Arch Manning because of his last name, that might be a little bit true, but it doesn't change the fact that you're biased because of his last name, right? So some people are saying, he's a 5-star because his last name's Manning, Well, you're saying he's a 3-star if his last name wasn't Manning. And so the truth is probably somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
Like, and he may be every bit of a 5-star. But the point is, to those people saying he'd be a 3-star if his last name wasn't Manning, at the very least, a high 4-star. Like, this dude's he's a baller, right?
Yeah, they're not going to bump you 2 whole stars because of the last name. Like, that just doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah. So I think there's a little bit of that going on. I think quarterback depth is really big for them. They're solid backup. Also, I just think Steve Sarkisian, and I had this conversation with Brogan when we were talking about who was going to take that Alabama role. He said he didn't want Sark. I said he was crazy for that.
Yeah.
I think Sark is an amazing head coach.
Agreed.
Also, his story is awesome. And I know that doesn't mean anything when you're talking about being a head coach in college football. But I like Sark a lot, and I feel I'm not a big Texas fan, but I feel very good about where Texas is, what their trajectory is.
For sure.
Now, being your first year in the SEC and, not just having to play an SEC team at the end of the year, but having to play an SEC schedule.
Yeah.
And look, we saw them beat Alabama in week 2 last year. I think we also both can say that Alabama wasn't in week 2 what they were in week 12. They actually played pretty horrendously in week 12 last year against Auburn, but they weren't in week 2 what they were at the end of the year.
Yeah.
So I wonder if Texas they catch a game like Alabama did in week 2 last year, because having to play that SEC schedule, all of a sudden you're going to have to play those teams, and it's not going to be one time out of the year. It's going to be several times out of the year. And look, just calling it what it is, the SEC was way more competitive than the Big 12 was last year.
100%.
Right? Like, Oklahoma State had Ollie Gordon, and he was arguably the best running back in the country. Top 5, no doubt about it. But that was their offense.
I mean, he won the award.
Yeah. He won, but that's what I'm saying. It's arguable because if you want to talk stats and all that kind of stuff, but no doubt about top 5 running back in the country. But that was Oklahoma State's offense, and that was a team that made it to the Big 12 championship.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So like. And Oklahoma's coming over to the SEC too, and Oklahoma, in my opinion, was probably a little bit better than Oklahoma State, but they battled injury, and again, another factor coming over to the SEC. You better have the depth.
Yeah. Playing
an extra game at the end of the year because of the 12-team playoff, you better have the depth. So having to go through that SEC schedule, I don't know if I would have them as high as 3, but I think they're certainly a team that can win the national championship. Just very interested to see how they do playing a tougher schedule. Number 4, Alabama, plus 1,100. This one is a lot of people I know are pissed off about this. Brand new head coach, guys like Julian Sand, like Caleb Downs, like guys like Isaiah Bond, like these guys that balled out for him, gone, and they have the 4th best odds to win the national championship. And by the way, Nick Saban's not there.
Yeah, that's pretty big.
4th best odds to win the national championship at plus 1,100. Do you have thoughts there, or should I just jump into mine?
I mean, to the people being mad, I mean, we've talked about it before. Like, yeah, Nick Saban's gone, but Kalen DeBoer was in the national championship last year. He's been there, and not many coaches can say that. There's not many coaches that can say they led a team to a national championship in the last however many years, and he was there a couple months ago. So I don't really hate them at 4, and it has them behind Georgia. Georgia's at number 1, Alabama's at number 4. It has them behind Georgia and still up there. Like, I don't hate that whatsoever. I still think that they're probably top 3 SEC team, and
that's what this list has. Them as.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh yeah, Texas too. Forgot about that.
Yeah.
But yeah, well yeah, that's crazy. 3 SEC schools in the top 4. I didn't even think about it that way. But yeah, I don't hate this at all. I mean, I think it's fair rank for them. What do you think?
I think in year 1, I probably wouldn't have them this high. But look, I went on my little rant a couple weeks, or not even a couple weeks ago, on the last show we did. I went on my little rant about Kalen DeBoer being in a better position in year 1 at Alabama than Josh Heupel was whenever he got to Tennessee. And Kalen DeBoer is a guy that has proven he can win. He's gone to several places, even at a lower level at Sioux Falls, won there. Went to Indiana, won there with Michael Penix Jr. Not a national championship, but consistently won and had a really solid season. Went to Fresno State, put out Jake Haener, who led the nation in passing 2 years consecutively. That is very impressive. Fresno State, impressive. Yeah. He got to Washington. The year before he got to Washington won 2 games, 2 out of their 12. They went 2-10 that year. And inside 2 seasons, he brought Washington to the national championship game. Kalen DeBoer is a hell of a coach. Like,
he wins games.
He wins. And not only does he win, he does everything right. He does all of the small things right, and he builds a team that wants to play for him. Mm-hmm. And I think that whenever you put a guy like that in Tuscaloosa to replace Nick Saban after what Nick Saban built, the DNA of that organization now is built on winning. They have an administration that's behind them. They have a backing that supports them in NIL. They have the facilities to go and compete with the best. They have the trainers to do everything they need to do. Their support staff is really solid. When you give a guy like Kalen DeBoer all of those tools, you're making another monster. Yeah. And I don't think I'm by no means am I saying he's another Nick Saban, because I think that would be a discredit to everything Nick Saban's done. He's the GOAT of our sport. But when you're talking about guys who are currently in college football, I think Kalen DeBoer is one of the biggest names. And whether people will acknowledge that right now is a different story. But I think looking back in 5 years, we're going to be like, why in the hell did we let Alabama sign Kalen DeBoer? Yeah. We're going to be like, why did these other organizations who were looking for coaches in 2021 and 2022, why did they not go get them before Bama? Mm-hmm. And I think that's what we're going to be looking at. I think he is one of the biggest fish, he's a whale in college football. He's a really, really good coach. And if people aren't willing to acknowledge that yet, they're going to be forced to in the next several years, because Alabama's not going anywhere.
One thing we've learned about Alabama over the past couple of years, and I don't think that this will change, is they don't rebuild. They simply just reload, and they're back every year.
Yes, I'm
with you. The difference is Nick Saban's gone. I get that. But like you're saying, in a couple of years, we'll look back and be like, this is crazy how we let this happen. It starts now. Like, it starts this season, and I'm not saying that they're going to win the title this year, because I don't think they will. Yeah, I don't think they will. But having them this high up there is respect, where it's deserved. I think that this is a very, very fair ranking for them.
I think it's a little high. And I'm not saying that in contradiction to everything I just said. Those two things don't contradict each other.
Yeah, but Rome wasn't built in a day, is what you're saying. It's not going to be overnight. All right, we went from Nick Saban, now we're going back to the national champ. Like, no. And I get that. Yeah. But at the same time, I do think that they're going to be great this year.
Yeah, I think they're going to be a team that ruins several seasons in the SEC. Ooh. Like, now here's the thing, right? Do I think they can make the playoff? Yeah. Do I think they'll win it in year one? Probably not. Mm. But I think a team like Texas, who has a really good shot to be a 1 or a 5 seed, somewhere in there, depending on how they play in their SEC schedule, Alabama's a team that could ruin that for them. Yeah. And Alabama's a team that could get to the playoff and ruin somebody who had a really good season's year, but not be able to close it out because they're under year one and a new coach. And can they do it? Absolutely. I just think it's a little early.
Very fitting for Alabama to be the season ruiners, the villains. It's very fitting for them to be that team this year. And you know I'm not wrong.
Yeah, but it is a regression.
Well, yeah, but so when you have the greatest coach of all time, anything is going to be a regression. Yeah. Especially in year one.
Okay, so I know we're just talking about the top 5 here, but we got to round out to 2 because there's a tie for 5. Yes. So we have Oregon and LSU both tied for the 5th best odds at plus 1,200. I think you're talking about 2 really good coaches, 2 really good rosters too. Like Oregon plus 1,200, LSU plus 1,200. Problem is, you look at both of these teams, both lose their quarterback. One of them won the Heisman, Jaden Daniels. Bo Nix was right there in the mix with the third. He had the 3rd most votes to win it. Both lose them. LSU loses Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr. at the receiver position. Well, Oregon loses Troy Franklin. You know what I'm saying? They're losing a lot of their biggest producers offensively, I don't know if it's going to make that much of a difference. And I'm not saying LSU is going to have another Jaden Daniels. I'm not even really saying they're going to have another Malik Neighbors or Brian Thomas Jr. I'm not saying Oregon's going to have another Bo Nix. I'm not saying they're going to have another Troy Franklin. But they're going to replace them. Oregon brought in Dylan Gabriel and Dante Moore. LSU replaced Jaden Daniels with Garrett Nussmeier, who, if you ask a lot of the fans down there, they'll say they love Jaden Daniels and are endlessly grateful for what he brought to that program and bringing another Heisman back and winning them a lot of games this year because the defense was abysmal. But if you ask them what their thoughts were in the summer last year, a lot of them wanted Garrett Nussmeier. Well, they're getting him now.
Yeah.
And you look at Oregon, you're going to see which of those guys, Dylan Gabriel or Dante Moore, steps up and takes that job, as well as what they did as well as what Oregon did in the recruiting out of high school. I don't think these are teams that are going to take a step back. I think if you look at LSU, they're probably just going to even out a little bit. I think naturally you're going to have to take a step back offensively. Probably not going to have the number one scoring offense. Probably not going to be number one in total offense like you were last year. But I think the defense is going to get a lot better.
Yeah.
Look at what they did in terms of building that defensive staff. I think the defense is going to get a lot better. And that doesn't mean they're going to be top 10 in the country, but I think you're going to see that team kind of even out as opposed to –
they'll go from here and here to more so a very balanced team this year.
Yeah. And so I don't think the team as a whole is going to take a step back. I think they're going to be right there in the mix, potentially 9-3, 10-2, somewhere in there. And I think the same can be said about Oregon.
Yeah.
Problem with Oregon is their schedule gets a lot harder. And so I think you're talking about two really evenly matched teams. But LSU they're going to take a little step back offensive, probably a decent sized step back offensively, a step up defensively, but they're not going to play a tougher schedule necessarily than what they had to play in years past. They do add USC and UCLA to their schedule. They're going to get Oklahoma at home at the end of the year. So those are three games that they ordinarily wouldn't play that are tough games. Oregon's got to go to the Big Ten. Yeah. So like that's not an easy draw for them. So I'm very interested to see how those two teams play out. Now they're tied at the fifth best odds. If you had to pick right now, who has the better season?
I'd probably give it to Oregon.
Really?
Yeah. I think that what they did in the transfer portal this year, going into this offseason, I think what Dan Lanning is building in Oregon is special for sure.
100%.
And I think that this is the year that Oregon, they're going to look at this season and be like, all right, we made it close, but we didn't cut it. This is the year that we have to make the jump. And I think that Oregon's going to take that mentality and they're going to run with it all year. And they're going to make that jump this year. They have a lot to prove going to a new conference, losing a quarterback, like you said, losing guys on offense. But I think that Dan Lanning is there for the long run. And I think that he wants to prove something, and he wants Oregon to be there. And I think that he's going to have all of his guys ready to run through a brick wall for him.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think Oregon's going to be really, really solid. That being said, I think LSU is probably going to have the better year. And I don't know if that means LSU's the better team, but I think LSU will probably have the better year in the regular season. I think we're talking about two teams that could both make the playoff, by the way.
Yeah, 100%.
Problem is the way the freaking playoff is built because, yet again, add a dollar to the piggy bank, the NCAA blows. You're going to get the six highest ranked conference champions are just in. Well, there's only four power conferences now because the Pac-12 is demolished.
They don't exist.
Yeah. So
how's that going to work in the playoffs?
You see what I'm saying?
So, like, how many teams? Is it Pac-2 this year? They're playing, what, the ACC?
No, the Mountain West.
I mean, even worse, but...
significantly worse. The ACC is a power conference.
Yeah. So they're going to be
playing Boise State.
Do they just get, like, an auto bid this year? Like, how's that going to work?
Yeah, dude.
NCAA blows.
Yep. So the point I'm making is you're going to see six highest ranked conference champions make the playoff. And then you're talking about the other six is just the field. I think Oregon and LSU are two teams that could be mixed in there in that six.
Yeah.
But that means one of Ohio State, Michigan, potentially Penn State. Like one of them is going to make it. Whoever wins the SEC, if it is Georgia, if it is Texas, the other probably going to make it. Alabama's a team that could be right there, right mixed in there. So you look at the ACC, you look at the Big 12, and you're like, who's in? Is it a Florida State? Is it a Clemson? And one of them, there's going to be a team from those conferences that get into the playoff because they're going to just win the conference. They're going to win the conference. But are there any other teams in those conferences that make it? I think it gets really dicey. And that's why I was so against the 12-team playoff because I think the biggest argument for it was you need to have more parity. There needs to be more teams that have an opportunity. But the only teams that you're given more of an opportunity really is the teams in the SEC and the Big Ten, and that's the teams that win it anyway.
Yeah.
So I think you're just going to keep seeing the same winners. But beside the point. So you said Oregon. I think LSU is going to have the better year in the regular season. I think they can both get there to the playoff.
Yeah. I think they both will, personally. That'd be a fun matchup to see.
I would love to see that matchup.
If that's the matchup we somehow get in the playoffs, I would love that.
I would love to see that matchup.
I'd love to watch that game.
All right. Last thing I want to talk about. We touched on Florida's schedule. They had the number one strength of schedule going into 2024. So naturally, the next team we got to talk about is the team with the number two strength of schedule. Well, that's USC.
Yeah.
It's not easy.
No.
Per se.
And I definitely think that this USC team, we were talking about, are these teams going to make jumps or regressions or whatever? I think USC is going to regress this year.
I don't know.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know if USC regresses. They weren't all that great last year.
Okay. I don't think they significantly improved.
Okay, and that's fine. I'm not going to necessarily disagree with you. You're going into a much harder conference. Oregon and Washington were both right there in the mix last year. Oregon's only two losses came to Washington. Washington played for the national championship. So they're going to the Big Ten with you. Those are two teams that were clearly better. Not to mention Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State are they're already there.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Like the two teams that you would want to shake from your old conference just so happen to follow you.
Yeah.
And now you have to face the rest of this conference that is significantly better than a conference that no longer exists.
Which matchup-wise are your nightmares? Because they're much bigger on the offensive and defensive lines, and they can just run it all over you. And we saw last year they couldn't stop the run.
No. Couldn't stop a nosebleed.
So let's go through this schedule. They open the season September 1st in Las Vegas against LSU. I think this one's going to be very, very interesting. I don't think USC is going to lose that DNA of high-scoring offense, just high-flying, high-powered, quick-moving. I think they're going to keep that. And I think out the gate, they're going to try and take advantage of LSU and LSU's defense from what we saw last year. And I think it's going to be a very quick test for LSU is, hey, how much have you gotten better defensively?
Yeah. This is definitely going to be a test right out the gate for LSU. Like, if they had this game in week 10 or week 8 or somewhere in that range where LSU kind of has some time to get their stuff together. But we've seen over the last couple of years where LSU week 1 has just been not the same team they are later in the year. And I think defensively, I think they are going to improve this year, and they need to prove it right out the gate. They need to get better, and they need to have a better defense right out the gate, which I think is going to be difficult to do. I think it takes some time for those adjustments to take place. Usually you kind of get like a cupcake game to start the year, and then you start to work your way into the harder schedule. Well, now you're playing one of the best last year, one of the best offenses in the country, and like you said, you don't think they're going to change their attack this year. So it's going to be a battle.
Yeah. Now, if you look at LSU in this game, you say, and we're not talking about rosters or anything like that, because transfer portal and all that, like it's
the roster could be completely different from now than what it is
100%
a couple months from now.
But we can't talk about his coaching staff, and that's why I'm saying Lincoln Riley with just his offensive, approach to the game. USC is going to be able to score the ball. LSU just canned Matt House. Like, they have a new defensive coordinator in there right now. They went and hired a new defensive line coach. They went and hired a defensive backs coach in Corey Raymond and brought him back. Out the gate, you get Lincoln Riley and USC. There's going to be talent on that side of the ball. Even if they're not there yet, they're going to bring talent in through the transfer portal. And there is talent there already, by the way.
Yeah.
But they're going to bring more in through the transfer portal, and Lincoln Riley's going to have access to these guys and coach up a really, really good offense. Now, does that mean they're going to go win 9, 10 games? Not necessarily, but it means they're capable of winning games. That defense of LSU is going to be tested right off the gate. We're not picking wins and losses here, but that's a solid matchup.
For sure.
That's a solid matchup.
Yes.
Week 2, they get Utah State. Okay. Then they get a bye week and go to Ann Arbor. Get Michigan in week 4, defending national champions. Now, luckily for USC, new head coach, new defensive coordinator, whom we don't even know yet. That one could be interesting. But if I had to guess, USC, unless they make some serious moves in the transfer portal, is just going to be outmatched here.
Yeah.
Just on the offensive and defensive lines. But who knows? Again, not talking about rosters. Can't even really talk matchups because we're not there yet. But that is 2 of your first 3 games are LSU and Michigan is tough.
Yeah.
That's rough. Welcome to the Big Ten. And LSU's not in the Big Ten, but they're in the other big conference. So
Welcome to the big leagues, boys.
yeah, welcome to it. This is not West Coast football anymore.
This is not Pac-12 after dark. No
Yeah.
disrespect to Pac-12 after dark. Love it.
Pac-12 after
Love
dark is goated.
Yes.
And
Love it.
and was goated.
Yeah.
Rest in
RIP.
peace. Week 5, 4th game of the year, they get Wisconsin. Luke Fickell. Luke Fickell's a great coach. They're going to have a good rushing attack. That's just what's going to happen. They're just going to have a really good rushing attack. And I think their defense is going to start to come along as well. Then they get Minnesota. Minnesota kind of fell off a little bit, but PJ Fleck is awesome. He's a great head coach, and we'll see what that ends up coming to. Point is, if Minnesota, which I don't think they will be the worst team, or they could potentially be the worst team that USC plays next year, that ain't Stanford.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like that's a better team there.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. And that look, when you're talking about the worst teams that USC is going to play next year, or it's not because those are bad teams, but just not as high caliber as the rest of the schedule. You get Minnesota, Rutgers, Nebraska. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I don't think those teams are horrible either.
Yeah.
Okay. Again, LSU, Utah State, bye week, Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Penn State at home. Rough one. You're only to October 12th at this point. There's 3 top 15 matchups on the schedule before October 15th, and realistically, they could all be losses.
Yeah.
And I don't know if they will be. Again, not saying wins and losses, but that's rough. Then you go to Maryland, you get Rutgers at home, and then your first game in November is at Washington.
Oof.
So they get both teams that played in the national championship. Now, Washington lost a lot of their roster. They have a new head coach. They get Jed Fish out of Arizona. So I'm very interested to see what Washington turns out to be. But I think Jed Fish is a really good coach. You saw his offensive play style last year with guys like Noah Fafita and McMillan. But we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens there. That's only November 2nd. They get a bye week on November 9th. Then they get Nebraska at home. They go to UCLA, which is, an hour and a half drive. And only because of traffic. It's not an hour and a half away, but LA traffic. And then they close the year out at home versus Notre Dame.
Tough.
Brother, if they find a way, if they get through this schedule, it is not my prediction that USC makes the playoff next year. But if USC makes the playoff this next year with this schedule,
Dangerous.
oh boy.
Yeah, if they make the playoffs facing these teams, oof.
Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 of their 12 matchups are against ranked opponents, and all 5 of them are top 15. That is a brutal schedule.
Yeah.
That is brutal. If this team, and again, I think they'll have 3 or 4 losses on their record at the end of the year. Way too early prediction. But I think they'll probably have 3 or 4 losses on their record at the end of the year. If they find a way to make the playoff, this team is scary.
Oh, yeah. Like, they just need to find it. Like, they need to find their identity on defense. They need to get everything together, keep everything the way they're going on offense. And You know, I think if they're a team, if they can click on all cylinders and they can get it together, I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if half these or all these teams that we're talking about are losses, but at the same time, wouldn't be surprised if they were wins.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a few that right off the gate, like you think that they're going to lose right away. But I think that USC is one of those teams that could play against almost anybody. Not saying they're going to win, but they can compete.
Last year they couldn't, but the biggest news for them, and this feels terrible. I hope the guy is successful.
We say this every single time we talk about it.
I know, because I feel so bad. I feel so bad about it. Look, I didn't do anything to the guy. Like, I didn't make him be bad at coaching defense, but Alex Grinch is gone for them. And I've been saying since Lincoln Riley was at Oklahoma that Lincoln Riley will not win until he can prove that he makes the hires necessary. And sometimes that means
you got to make the tough decisions. If a guy isn't cut out for a job in a certain scenario, he's not cut out for it. It's no disrespect to him. Go get a job somewhere else. Like, he'll coach high school. He'll be
State
fine.
Farm's hiring, but I'm kidding.
Hey, I'm sure.
And that was, I don't mean to be disrespectful. I honestly, I hope he's successful and happy in life and doing all the things he wants to do. It just doesn't seem like coaching, being a defensive coordinator at a Power 5 level is necessarily that. So I'm very interested to see what Dan Lynn does at USC. I'm interested to see how he transfers that defense there and what they turn out to be. Because I think if they can, like we were talking about with LSU, right? They had one of the best offenses in the country and just an abysmal defense, one of the worst. If LSU can bring up their defense, they might be able to compete a little bit more. Mm-hmm. If USC can bring up their defense with just the offensive prowess of Lincoln Riley, it's a team that's right there in the mix. Like, even at Oklahoma, bro. At Oklahoma, Lincoln Riley was in the playoff what felt like every year. With a solid defense, this is a team that can be scary. So I'm very interested to see what that what he brings to that defense, and we'll see what happens.
So I just checked back. Right now, USC is at plus 4,000 to win it all, which puts them at 16th overall, which I think is very. Do you think that's fair for them, or do you think that's too high? Do you think that's too low? Definitely not too low. But do you think that's too high for them? I think
it's pretty high, bro. But
I think the opening odds like this is assuming, I think they're, if everything gets figured out. Best case scenario, I'd put them at 16 right now. That's if, I know going into the season that everything that they're going to do is going to work, which it's not. That's not how anything works most of the time. But 16 is a little high, but I don't think they're lower than 20.
Well, who would you let's talk about it. What universities would you think have better odds to win the national championship next year than USC?
Let me just scroll here.
Because my gut reaction was that felt high, but let's talk about it. I think Georgia, Michigan, Alabama. Count these off for me.
Georgia, Ohio.
Well, hold on. Let me just give you my opinion before you go into that, because I want to try and see if my opinion is right. In terms of, I said 16 was a little high. I want to see if I can name 15 or 16 teams higher than them. So I would say Georgia, Michigan, Alabama, Texas, Ohio State, Penn State, Oregon, Washington, LSU. I would say Oklahoma, and I would say Clemson, Florida State. Let's go to the Big 12. Problem is, one of those teams is for sure getting there. So I would say maybe a Utah. They get Cam Rising back. Maybe 16 is a good spot for them.
Yeah, because I'm scrolling to the teams underneath them. They have Utah right underneath them. They have Washington underneath. Miami's a fun team. Who knows? Kansas State, Arizona, all those teams below them, I don't think they really have a chance to. I think that those teams, I don't know. I think 16.
Texas A&M in my opinion, has a much better chance than them.
Well, yeah, they're ranked above them. So yeah, the books agree with you there.
Yeah.
So above them is Oklahoma, Tennessee, A&M, Missouri. That's interesting. Notre Dame, Penn State, Clemson, Florida State, and then all the other teams we mentioned before. And
Missouri is very interesting.
That is an interesting one.
We'll have to talk about them on a different episode, but. Very interesting. Brady Cook coming back. Interesting. Jenny Stevens, 75. I wish we played them week 2. I'll have to.
I think it's LSU versus USC, maybe.
Yeah, I think that can go either way for either team. I'm sure USC would rather play LSU week 2, and
Isn't that
sure
technically
LSU
a
would
week
rather play-
0 game?
No.
I think it is.
I don't believe so. Week 0.
I mean, either way, it doesn't.
Week 0 games are played in August.
Well, it's September 1st. So,
Week 1 was September 2nd this year.
I don't know. Week 0, week 1 doesn't really matter. But it's the first game of the year.
Yeah. All right. Well, I said we weren't going to go an hour of this show, but sure enough, we found a way to do it. That's all we got. Seriously, I can't stress enough. This is so good. Bywater Bourbon. Go wherever you go to, Total Wine, go to Rouse's, go wherever you need to go. Go to 73distilling.com if you need to get this stuff. It's solid.
Oh, yeah.
Any of the stuff that they offer, any of the spirits they offer is really, really good. Go check it out. If you're going, I know I know the university you support has sports other than just college football. If you're going to any of those events, SeatGeek, code 10-second runoff. That is 10 SECONDRUNOFF. Thank you for the moral support head nod there. We will see y'all soon.